They say character is what you do when no one is watching. But for Sarah Miller, the whole world was about to watch. When she swiped her debit card to pay for a stranger's coffee, she had exactly $12.40 left in her bank account. She didn't do it for fame. She didn't do it for a reward. She did it because the man shivering in booth 4 looked like he hadn't eaten in days. She thought she was just buying a $3 latte for a homeless man. She was wrong. She had just bought into a war for a billion-dollar empire, and the receipt was about to cost her everything. This is the story of the tip that changed history. The rain in Portland doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. That's how Sarah Miller felt every time she clocked in at the Silver Spoon. Slick with the grease of 1,000 burgers, weighed down by the humidity of the dish pit, and exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Sarah was 24, but the dark circles under her eyes belonged to someone twice her age. She adjusted her apron, trying to hide the fraying hem. She needed this job. Actually, she needed 3 jobs, but this was the only one that let her take the leftover bread rolls home at the end of the shift. "Table 4 needs a wipe down, Miller. Stop daydreaming or I'll dock your tips," barked Brad. Brad Gorski was the manager, a man whose primary management style involved sweating profusely and yelling at the youngest waitresses. He had the personality of a wet sock and the empathy of a brick wall. "On it, Brad," Sarah said, keeping her voice flat. She learned long ago that fighting back only got your shifts cut. She grabbed the rag and moved to booth 4. That's when she saw him. He wasn't sitting at the table. He was sort of collapsed into the corner of the booth, clutching a coat that had clearly seen better decades. It was a tweed overcoat, moth-eaten at the collar, stained with mud. He wore a newsboy cap pulled low over eyes that were milky with cataracts or age. She couldn't tell which. His hands, trembling slightly, were wrapped around a glass of water, like it was a lifeline. He looked like the city felt. Grey, discarded, and cold. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah asked softly. "Can I get you something? The menu is right there." The old man looked up. His face was a map of deep wrinkles, unshaven for days, but there was something sharp in the way he tilted his head. "Coffee," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel crunching under tires. "Black. And perhaps a slice of the cherry pie, if it's fresh." "It was made this morning," Sarah lied. "It was yesterday's, but she would heat it up so the crust softened." "Coming right up." As she walked to the counter, Brad intercepted her. He crossed his thick arms, blocking her path to the coffee pot. "Don't bother," Brad sneered, nodding toward the old man. "Look at him, Sarah. He smells like a wet dog. He's a bum. He's going to eat, say he forgot his wallet, and we're out $5. Kick him out." Sarah felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. "It's raining freezing rain out there, Brad. He's 80 years old if he's a day. I'm getting him a coffee." "If he doesn't pay, it's coming out of your paycheck," Brad warned, pointing a sausage-like finger at her chest. "And you're already on thin ice after being late Tuesday." "Fine," Sarah snapped, and she poured the coffee. She cut the biggest slice of pie the tin allowed. She walked it back to booth 4. The old man ate with a trembling urgency that broke Sarah's heart. He didn't speak, didn't look up, just consumed the sugar and caffeine as if his internal battery was blinking red. When he was done, he patted the pockets of his coat. He patted them again. The frantic tapping of his hands against the wet wool grew faster. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes wide with genuine panic. I had a bill," he stammered. "A 20. I had it right here, I swear." From the kitchen window, Sarah saw Brad watching. He was grinning. He was enjoying this. He started walking over, chest puffed out, ready to toss the old man onto the wet pavement. Sarah knew her bank balance by heart. She had checked it on her break. 12 old holos or 40 tolos. Her rent was due in 3 days. She was short by $200. Her younger brother Toby needed his asthma inhaler refill next week. That was $40. Every cent mattered. A $5 coffee and pie was a fortune. But looking at the old man's terrified face, the humiliation burning in his cheeks, she saw her own father before he passed. She saw the dignity that poverty tries to strip away from you. Brad arrived at the table. "Problem here, sir?" He said the word sir like an insult. "Time to pay up or I'm calling the cops for theft of services." The old man shrank back. I just need a moment to find." "I've got it," Sarah said. The silence in the diner was sudden and heavy. Even the couple in booth 2 stopped chewing. Brad whipped his head around. "What?" "I'm paying for it," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. She pulled her debit card out of her apron. "Swipe it. It's on me." Brad looked at her, then at the old man, then back at her. He laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "You can't even afford new shoes, Miller. But you're buying charity meals for bums? Suit yourself." He snatched the card from her hand and marched to the register. The machine beeped. Approved. He tossed the card back onto the counter. Sarah picked it up and turned to the old man. He wasn't trembling anymore. He was staring at her with an intensity that was almost unsettling. The fog in his eyes seemed to clear for a second, revealing a piercing, steel-blue intelligence. "Why?" the old man asked. "You don't know me. You don't have money to waste. I heard your manager." Sarah shrugged, gathering his empty plate. "My dad used to say that we're all just one bad day away from needing a hand. You looked like you were having a bad day. Just pay it forward when you find that 20. The old man slowly reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a napkin. He took a pen, a surprisingly expensive-looking silver fountain pen, from his pocket and scribbled something on it. "I don't have my wallet," he said quietly, "but I have a memory. What is your full name, my dear?" "Sarah. Sarah Miller." "Sarah Miller," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "I am Arthur. Just Arthur." He stood up. For a frail old man, he moved with a sudden, rigid grace. He placed the napkin on the table. "Thank you for the coffee, Sarah Miller. It was the best meal I've had in 40 years. He walked out into the rain. Sarah looked down at the napkin. It didn't have a phone number or a IOU. It just had a signature, written in elegant, old-world calligraphy. AS. Expect the unexpected. "Sentimental garbage," Brad muttered, walking past and swiping the napkin off the table to throw it in the trash. "Get back to work, Miller, and since you love giving away money, you can stay late and clean the grease traps. Off the clock." Sarah gritted her teeth. She wanted to quit. She wanted to scream. But she thought of Toby's inhaler. She marched to the back to clean the traps. Outside, in the pouring rain, the old man didn't walk to a bus stop. He walked around the corner into the shadowed alleyway. A sleek, black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows idled against the curb. As the old man approached, the back door swung open. A man in a sharp suit jumped out, holding a large umbrella to shield the old man from the rain. "Mr. Ivory," the driver said, his voice hushed and respectful. "We were worried. The board meeting starts in an hour. Your son is already asking questions." The old man, Arthur Ivory, the founder of Ivory Heavy Industries, a man worth an estimated $4.2 billion, shrugged off the wet tweed coat, revealing a tailored Italian suit beneath it. He handed the wet coat to the driver. "Let Jade ask his questions," Arthur said, his voice no longer raspy, but commanding and cold. I just found the answer to the only question that matters." He climbed into the leather interior of the SUV. "Get me the legal team on the phone, not the company lawyers. My private counsel, Weatherby and Associates." "Sir?" the driver asked, closing the door. Arthur Ivory looked out the rain-streaked window at the flickering neon sign of the Silver Spoon Diner. "I'm rewriting the will," Arthur whispered to himself. "Tonight." If Rock Bottom had a basement, Sarah Miller had just found the key. 3 weeks had passed since she bought coffee for the old man, Arthur. In the chaos of her daily survival, the memory of his face had faded, replaced by the crushing anxiety of the present. The unexpected he had promised hadn't happened, unless you counted the transmission on her 2004 Honda Civic finally giving up the ghost on I-5. Now she was walking to work. It was a 40-minute trek in the biting Oregon wind. When she arrived at the Silver Spoon, winded and 5 minutes late, the atmosphere was poisonous. Brad Gorski was waiting by the register, his face a mottled shade of crimson. He wasn't alone. 2 police officers stood by the door, hands resting idly on their belts. Sarah's stomach dropped. "Brad, what's going on?" "You tell me, Miller." Brad spat. He slammed a printout onto the counter. "Drawer was short $50 last night. You closed. You counted it." Sarah stammered, looking at the officers. "It was balanced when I left. I swear, I double-checked the slips." "Funny," Brad sneered, "because I checked the cameras, or I tried to. The feed for the register malfunctioned for 10 minutes right before you clocked out. Convenient." "I didn't take anything." Sarah's voice rose, panic setting in. "Brad, you know me. I've worked here for 2 years." "And for 2 years, I've suspected you were trash," Brad said, leaning in close so only she could hear. "I don't need proof to fire you in an at-will state. Get your stuff. Get out. If I see you here again, I'm filing charges for theft." "But, out!" he screamed. Sarah stumbled back, tears stinging her eyes. She saw the smirk on Brad's face. She knew, with a sudden, sickening clarity, that he had taken the money himself. He had a gambling habit. Everyone knew it. He needed a scapegoat, and the waitress who challenged him 3 weeks ago was the perfect target. She walked out into the cold, untying her apron and letting it drop into a puddle. She had no job, no car, and rent was late. Meanwhile, in the Ivory Estate, West Hills, the wake was a somber affair, if you considered somber to mean $500 a plate catering and a room full of people checking their stock portfolios while pretending to mourn. Arthur Ivory was dead. Heart failure, they said. He had passed away in his sleep 2 days ago. Jade Ivory, Arthur's only son and heir apparent, stood by the mahogany casket, holding a glass of scotch. Jade was 55, tanned, and wore a suit that cost more than Sarah Miller made in a year. He didn't look sad. He looked impatient. "It's a tragedy, truly," said heavy-set man, a board member named Vance. No, his name was Greg. Greg Patterton. "He lived a long life," Jade said, checking his Rolex. "The company needs stability now, Greg. The shareholders are jittery. I intend to announce the transition of power immediately after the will is read tomorrow." "Of course," Greg nodded. "We all know the empire goes to you. Who else would it go to? Your daughter?" Jade snorted. He looked across the room at his daughter, Ashley. She was 22, currently taking a selfie with the open casket in the background. "Ashley couldn't run a lemonade stand," Jade muttered. No. The old man was difficult, but he was a traditionalist. He knew I was the only one capable of steering the ship. A man in a charcoal suit approached them. He was holding a briefcase like it contained a bomb. This was James Weatherby, Arthur's private attorney for 40 years, Weatherby was a legend in the legal world, a man who never smiled and never lost. "Jade," Weatherby said, his voice dry. "James," Jade nodded confidently. "I assume the paperwork is ready for tomorrow? I want the transfer of assets to be seamless. I have a meeting with the Japanese investors on Friday." Weatherby adjusted his glasses. He looked at Jade with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to warning. "The paperwork is ready," Weatherby said. "But you should know, Jade, your father made a change to his last will and testament on November 14th. Jade froze. The Scotch glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "A change? What kind of change?" "A significant one," Weatherby said. He added a codicil. It supersedes all previous drafts. "Regarding what assets?" Jade demanded, his voice dropping to a hiss. "The vacation homes? The charity trusts?" Weatherby paused. "Regarding the controlling stake in Ivory Heavy Industries and the liquid bulk of the estate." Jade's face went pale. Who? Who did he leave it to? He didn't marry that nurse, did he?" "No," Weatherby said calmly. "We will discuss the details tomorrow at the reading. 10 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." Weatherby turned and walked away. Jade gripped his glass so hard it shattered. Shards of crystal sliced into his palm, blood dripping onto the expensive Persian rug. He didn't even feel it. "November 14th, Jade whispered. Where was he on November 14th? He pulled out his phone and dialed the head of his father's security detail. "Track my father's movements on November 14th, Jade barked. "Every stop, every person he spoke to. I want to know who got into his head." Sarah sat on the floor of her living room. The furniture was gone. She had sold the sofa and the TV this morning just to pay the electric bill so Toby's nebulizer would work. Toby, her 10-year-old brother, was asleep in the bedroom. He had been coughing all night. Sarah was staring at a half-empty jar of peanut butter. This was dinner. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty apartment. Sarah flinched. It was the landlord. It had to be. He had threatened eviction if she didn't pay by the 5th. It was the 6th. "I'm not opening it," she whispered to herself. Knock, knock, knock. "Ms. Miller?" A voice came through the door. It wasn't the landlord. It was deep, professional, and calm. "Ms. Sarah Miller. My name is James Weatherby. I am an attorney." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. An attorney? Brad. He actually did it. He filed charges for the stolen $50. She stood up, shaking. If she didn't open the door, they'd break it down. If she ran, she'd leave Toby alone. She had to face it. She unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. 2 men stood in the hallway. One was an older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, Weatherby. The other was a mountain of a man in a black suit, wearing an earpiece. "I didn't take the money," Sarah blurted out immediately. "Check the cameras again. Brad is lying." Weatherby blinked. He looked at the peeling paint on the doorframe, then at Sarah's terrified face. His expression softened slightly. "I'm not here about money you took, Ms. Miller," Weatherby said. "I'm here about a coffee you bought." Sarah frowned, confusion overriding her fear. "Coffee? May we come in?" Sarah hesitated, then opened the door. The 2 men stepped into the tiny, barren living room. Weatherby looked around, noting the lack of furniture, the cold air, the jar of peanut butter on the floor. He took a deep breath. "My client passed away 3 days ago," Weatherby said gently. "His name was Arthur Ivory." "Arthur," Sarah searched her memory. "The old man at the diner, with the tweed coat?" "The very same. He died?" Sarah felt a pang of sadness. She had wondered about him. "I'm sorry. He seemed lonely." "But why are you here? He didn't owe me anything. I told him that. He disagreed, Weatherby said. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. Arthur Ivory was not a homeless man, Miss Miller. He was the founder of Ivory Industries. He was a billionaire. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah grabbed the doorframe for support. A what? A billionaire, Weatherby repeated, and 3 weeks ago, after leaving the diner, he came straight to my office. He instructed me to find you. He said you were the first person in 20 years to treat him like a human being without knowing who he was. I just bought him a coffee, Sarah whispered. You gave him his dignity, Weatherby corrected. Ms. Miller, you are required to attend the reading of his last will and testament. Today. Now. I can't, Sarah said, looking toward the bedroom. My brother is sick. I can't leave him. Weatherby nodded to the large security guard. Grant will stay here with him. He is a trained EMT. Or, if you prefer, we can arrange for private medical transport to the best respiratory clinic in the city. On the estate's dime. Sarah looked at Weatherby. This was insane. It was a prank, but the suit was real. The car she could see through the window, a Rolls-Royce, was real. Why? She asked. Because Arthur asked for you, Weatherby said. Please put on your best clothes. Sarah looked down at her jeans and stained t-shirt. This is all I have. Weatherby's eyes crinkled with something like respect. Then it will have to do. Come with me. The boardroom, Ivory Tower. 10:00 a.m. The room smelled of old money and lemon polish. A long oak table dominated the space. Jade Ivory sat at the head, drumming his fingers. Ashley was next to him, scrolling on her phone. On the other side sat Jade's wife, Catherine, a woman who looked like she was made of ice and diamonds. This is ridiculous, Jade snapped. Weatherby is 20 minutes late, and who is this mystery beneficiary? Probably some charity for stray cats. The heavy double door swung open. Weatherby walked in. Behind him, looking small and terrified in her worn-out sneakers and hoodie, was Sarah. The silence was absolute. Jade stared at her. He took in the cheap clothes, the messy hair, the look of poverty that clung to her. He let out a harsh laugh. Is this a joke, James? Jade asked. Who is this? The cleaning lady? Sarah shrank back, but Weatherby placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. He guided her to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, the seat directly facing Jade. This, Weatherby announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room, is Sarah Miller. Miller? Catherine wrinkled her nose. I don't know any Millers. Is she a distant cousin? She's a waitress, Weatherby said. He sat down and opened the leather folder in front of him. And she is the principal reason we are all here. Jade stood up, his face reddening. A waitress? You're telling me my father delayed the reading of his will for a waitress? Sit down, Jade, Weatherby commanded. It was the tone of a man who held all the cards. Jade slowly sat, his eyes burning holes into Sarah. Sarah couldn't make eye contact. She stared at the polished wood of the table, wishing she was anywhere else. I will now read the codicil dated November 14th, Weatherby began. He cleared his throat. I, Arthur Ivory, being of sound mind, do hereby revoke my previous bequeathments regarding the controlling interest of Ivory Industries and the entirety of my liquid assets. The room held its breath. To my son, Jade, I leave the beach house in Malibu and a monthly stipend of $5,000 on the condition that he never steps foot in the company headquarters again. What? Jade screamed, slamming his fist on the table. $5,000? I spend that on wine in a week. Weatherby ignored him and continued. To my granddaughter Ashley, I leave my collection of vintage cars, with the hope that she learns to drive them rather than pose on them. Ashley gasped. But I wanted the trust fund, and Weatherby paused. He looked directly at Sarah. To Sarah Miller, the woman who gave her last $12 to a stranger in the rain, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes 51% of the voting stock in Ivory Industries, my primary residence, and the balance of my personal accounts, totaling approximately $1.2 billion. The explosion of noise in the room was instant. Jade overturned his chair. Catherine screamed. But Weatherby raised a hand. I am not finished. There is a condition. The room went deadly silent again. Mr. Ivory knew that wealth is a heavy burden, Weatherby read. He did not want to ruin you, Sarah. He wanted to test you. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Test me. The will states, Weatherby continued, that Sarah Miller has full access to these funds immediately. However, she must manage the company and the assets for exactly 1 year. She cannot sell the stock. She cannot step down. If, after 1 year, the company's charitable index has not increased by 20%, or if she declares bankruptcy, the entire fortune reverts to Jade Ivory. Weatherby closed the folder. Jade's shock slowly morphed into a shark-like grin. He looked at Sarah, shaking, unqualified, terrified Sarah. 1 year, Jade said softly. You have to run a global conglomerate for 1 year. He walked around the table until he was standing right behind her. He leaned down, whispering into her ear. You're a waitress, Sarah. You can't even run a register. I give you a week before you beg me to take it back. Sarah looked at Weatherby. I can't do this. I don't know anything about business. Weatherby leaned forward. Arthur believed you have the one thing this family lacks. Heart. You don't have to know business, Sarah. You can hire people for that. You just have to lead. Jade straightened up and buttoned his jacket. We'll see about that. I'm going to sue. I'm going to drag your name through the mud. And I promise you, Miss Miller, by the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you had left that old man to rot in the diner. The elevator ride to the 50th floor took 45 seconds. For Sarah, it felt like a slow ascent to the gallows. In the 4 days since the reading of the will, her life had been incinerated. The press had camped outside her apartment building until the police had to escort her and Toby to a secure hotel. Her face was on every news channel. The headlines ranged from Cinderella story to the waitress who stole an empire. She looked at her reflection in the polished brass doors. She was wearing a new suit Weatherby's team had bought for her. It was navy blue, sharp, and cost more than her mother's car. But inside it, she still felt like the girl smelling of stale fryer grease. Chin up, Miss Miller, Weatherby said, standing beside her. They smell fear. Do not give them the satisfaction. The doors slid open. The Ivory Industries executive floor was a hive of activity that stopped instantly the moment she stepped out. Secretaries froze. Junior analysts stopped typing. 50 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Showtime, she whispered. She walked toward the main conference room for her first emergency board meeting. Jade was already there, leaning back in his chair, feet up on the table. The other 12 board members sat in stiff silence. Ah, Jade smirked as she entered. The coffee girl has arrived. Did you bring the creamer? Or are we skipping straight to the part where you resign? Get your feet off the table, Jade, Sarah said. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. Jade laughed, but he slowly lowered his legs. Touchy. Listen, Sarah, let's cut the charade. You're out of your depth. The stock dropped 14% this morning, just because you walked into the building. The shareholders are revolting. Sign the paper, take a $10 million payout, and go back to your diner. It's a generous offer." Sarah looked at the paper he slid across the table. $10 million. It would solve every problem she ever had. Toby would be set for life. But she remembered Arthur's signature on the napkin. Expect the unexpected. And she remembered the look in his eyes. He hadn't given this to her because he wanted her to be rich. He gave it to her because he trusted her. "I'm not signing," Sarah said, pushing the paper back. "I have 1 year." Jade's face darkened. "Fine, then buckle up." He turned to the board. The distribution center in Ohio just went on strike. 3,000 workers walked out an hour ago. They're demanding a 20% raise and better health care. If we don't settle by tomorrow, we miss the Christmas shipping window. The company loses $200 million. What's the play, Madam CEO? Sarah froze. A strike? They smell blood. Greg Patterton, the board member who had sneered at the funeral, chimed in. They know leadership is unstable. They're testing you. Fire them, Jade said casually. All of them. We have a contingency contract with a staffing agency. We can have scabs in there by midnight. Break the union before it starts. Fire 3,000 people right before Christmas? Sarah asked, horrified. It's business, Jade snapped. It's what my father would have done. No, Weatherby interjected softly. It's what you would do, Jade. Arthur would have negotiated. Arthur is dead! Jade slammed his hand on the table. And we are bleeding money. We vote to authorize the mass firing. All in favor? Every hand at the table went up, except Weatherby's. It's a democracy, sweetheart, Jade grinned. The board has spoken. Sign the termination order. Sarah looked at the document. Firing 3,000 families. People like her. People who lived paycheck to paycheck. She felt sick. I won't sign it, she said. Then you're in breach of your fiduciary duty, Jade said, his eyes gleaming. And we can remove you for incompetence right now. The will allows it if you endanger the company's solvency. It was a trap. If she signed, she betrayed everything she was. If she didn't, she lost the company. Sarah stood up. Her hands were shaking, but she hid them behind her back. I'm not signing it, she repeated, because I'm going to Ohio. I'm going to talk to them. The room erupted in laughter. You, Jade scoffed. You think you can talk down the steel workers' union? They'll eat you alive. Maybe, Sarah said, grabbing her bag. But I speak their language better than I speak yours. She walked out. As the door closed, she heard Jade dialing his phone. Let her go, Jade told someone on the other end. And make sure the press is there. I want the world to see her fail. It was snowing. A wet, heavy snow that turned the picket line into a muddy trench. The mood outside the massive warehouse gates was ugly. Men and women huddled around burn barrels, holding signs that read, Ivory Greed, and Billionaires Get Rich, We Get Sick. When the black SUV pulled up, the crowd surged forward. Eggs pelted the windows. This is unsafe, Miss Miller, the head of her security detail said. We should turn back. Sarah looked out the window. She saw a woman in a thin coat holding a toddler. She saw men with tired eyes. She didn't see enemies. She saw her neighbors. Open the door, Sarah said. Ms. Miller, I said open it. She stepped out. The cold hit her like a hammer. The crowd roared, angry shouts blending into a wall of noise. A camera crew, tipped off by Jade, was filming from the side, waiting for the disaster. Sarah didn't walk to the podium set up by the management team. She walked straight to the burn barrel where the workers were gathered. You the new boss? A large man with a beard growled. He wore a union jacket. Come to fire us in person? I'm Sarah, she said. And no, I came to ask why the coffee is so bad. The man blinked. He looked at the styrofoam cup in her hand. She had grabbed a cheap coffee from the gas station down the road. "What?" "I used to be a waitress," Sarah said, her voice loud enough to carry over the wind. "I know bad coffee. And I know that when people are willing to stand out in the freezing cold for 12 hours, it's not just about money, it's about respect." The crowd quieted down, just a fraction. "My manager used to yell at me for taking bathroom breaks," Sarah continued. "He'd dock my tips if I didn't smile enough. I know what it feels like to be a line item on a spreadsheet." "Then why don't you pay us?" a woman shouted. "We haven't had a raise in 4 years. Arthur Ivory froze our wages." "I didn't know that," Sarah said honestly, "but I'm looking at the books now, and I see that the executive bonuses last year totaled $40 million. A gasp went through the crowd. "I can't fix everything overnight," Sarah said, stepping closer to the bearded man. "But here is my offer. No layoffs. A 15% raise effective immediately." "And," she paused, looking at the freezing workers. "We upgrade the heating in the warehouse. I saw the maintenance reports. It's broken. That's illegal." The union leader narrowed his eyes. "And what do you want? The board won't like that." "I don't care what the board likes," Sarah said. "I own 51% of the vote. What I want is for you to get back to work so we can ship these toys. Because if we miss Christmas, we all lose." She held out her hand. It was ungloved and red from the cold. The union leader looked at her hand, then at her face. He saw the fear there, but he also saw the resolve. He spat on the ground, then took her hand. "Deal," he grunted. "But if you screw us, we burn the place down." "Fair enough," Sarah smiled weakly. As the workers cheered and began to dismantle the picket line, Sarah felt a wave of relief, so strong she almost collapsed. She had done it. She hadn't used a lawyer or a threat. She had just been human. But across the street, in a parked limousine, Jade Ivory was watching the live feed on a tablet. He wasn't angry. He was smiling, a cold reptilian smile. "She gave them a 15% raise," Jade said to the man sitting in the shadows beside him. "She just increased operating costs by $12 million a year. The stock will tank." "Is that good for us?" the man asked. "It's perfect," Jade said. "She's buying popularity with money she doesn't have. But we need to speed up the process. We need to break her spirit." Jade swiped the screen to a photo of a young boy, a boy with asthma. "Where is the brother right now?" Jade asked. "He's at the private school she just enrolled him in, St. Jude's Academy." "Good," Jade said. "It's time for a little bullying incident. Kids can be so cruel when they find out someone doesn't belong. Make sure Toby has a very bad week. If she's distracted by her crying brother, she'll make mistakes at the office." "And the other matter?" Jade tapped the glass of the window, watching Sarah shake hands with the workers. "Plant the documents," Jade commanded. "In her office. The FBI loves a good embezzlement story. Let's see how she handles federal prison." The victory in Ohio felt like a distant memory. For the last month, Sarah had been fighting a war on 2 fronts. Inside the boardroom, she was battling a stock price that bled value every time Jade whispered a rumor to the press. Outside, she was trying to be a sister to a confused 10-year-old boy who had been thrust into a world of wealth he didn't understand. It was 2 p.m. when her phone buzzed. It was the principal of St. Jude's. "Ms. Miller, you need to come immediately. It's Toby." Sarah's heart stopped. She was in the middle of a strategy meeting with the marketing team, trying to salvage the Q1 projections. "Is he hurt?" Sarah asked, already grabbing her coat. "There's been an incident. We found a significant amount of cash in his locker, and another student's watch. We're discussing expulsion." "Expulsion? Toby wouldn't steal a gum wrapper, let alone a watch." Please just come, Miss Miller." Sarah ran out of the office. "Cancel the rest of the day," she shouted to her assistant. As she sprinted for the elevator, she didn't see Jade standing by the water cooler, checking his watch. He smiled. The timing was impeccable. By the time Sarah returned to Ivory Tower 3 hours later, she was emotionally drained. Toby had been sobbing, swearing he was framed. The stolen watch belonged to the son of Greg Patterton, Jade's biggest ally on the board. The message was clear. "We can touch your family." She walked into her office, ready to call Weatherby and declare war. But Weatherby wasn't there. Instead, 4 men in windbreakers were going through her filing cabinets. "What is this?" Sarah demanded. "Who are you?" One of the men turned. The letters FBI were emblazoned on his jacket. "Sarah Miller?" he asked. "I'm Agent Holloway. We have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and financial records." "A warrant? For what?" "Embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering." Sarah laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "That's insane. I've been CEO for 6 weeks." "And in those 6 weeks," Agent Holloway said, holding up a plastic bag containing a hard drive, $5 million was transferred from the company pension fund into an offshore account in the Caymans, an account registered in your name. "I didn't do that," Sarah whispered. The room spun. "We traced the IP address," the agent said. "The transfers were authorized from this computer, your password, your digital signature." Jade strolled into the office, flanked by Greg Patterton. He looked the picture of concerned corporate responsibility. "This is a dark day for Ivory Industries," Jade said, shaking his head. "I tried to warn the board. She was a waitress, desperate for money. The temptation was too much." "You did this," Sarah hissed, lunging at him. "You planted it." The agent stepped in between them. "Ms. Miller, please. You need to come with us for questioning." "Jade!" Sarah screamed as she was led away. "You're stealing the pension fund. You're projecting." "Take her away," Jade said coldly. "And Greg, draft a press release. Interim CEO suspended pending federal investigation. I will step in to stabilize the ship." As Sarah was handcuffed and marched past the rows of glass cubicles, she saw the employees watching, the people she had tried to help. Some looked sympathetic, but most looked betrayed. She had become exactly what the world expected her to be, a fraud. Weatherby met her at the station 3 hours later. He looked old and tired. "I can get you out on bail," Weatherby said, "but the board has voted. You're suspended. Jade has seized control. He's already reversing your policies. The Ohio deal is dead. He's firing the workers tomorrow." "He framed me, James," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "He used my computer." "I know," Weatherby said, "but we can't prove it. The digital trail is perfect. Whoever he hired is a ghost." "So it's over?" Weatherby hesitated. "Technically, you haven't been convicted. You haven't declared bankruptcy, but you have no power. And if we don't find proof of his tampering within 48 hours, the board will permanently remove you for cause. The year won't matter." Sarah put her head in her hands. "I should have stayed at the diner." "Sarah," Weatherby said sharply, "Arthur didn't choose you because you were perfect. He chose you because you were fighter. Think. Did Arthur leave you anything else? Anything at all?" "Just the napkin," Sarah said. "And the money." "The napkin," Weatherby mused. "Expect the unexpected. It wasn't just a motto. Arthur loved puzzles." "Where is the napkin?" "It's in my jewelry box at the hotel." "Go get it," Weatherby said. "I'll handle the FBI. You handle the mystery." Sarah sat on the bed, staring at the napkin. It was wrinkled, stained with coffee rings. A.S. Expect the unexpected. She had looked at it 1,000 times. She held it up to the light. Nothing. She dipped it in water. A risk, but she was desperate. Nothing. Think, she muttered. You're Arthur Ivory. You know your son is a snake. You know he cooks the books. How do you protect the next CEO? She looked at the signature. The penmanship was beautiful. He had used a silver fountain pen. A silver fountain pen. She closed her eyes, replaying that day in the diner. He took a pen, a surprisingly expensive-looking silver fountain pen, from his pocket. The pen, Sarah whispered. Arthur hadn't left the pen. He had taken it with him. But wait. The coat. The tweed coat. On the day of the funeral, Weatherby had given her a box of Arthur's personal sentimental effects that Jade had thrown in the trash. The tweed coat was in there. Sarah scrambled to the closet and tore open the box. The coat smelled of rain and mothballs. She frantically patted the pockets. Empty. She checked the inner pocket. Empty. She screamed in frustration and threw the coat on the bed. As it landed, she heard a faint clink. She froze. She grabbed the coat again and felt the lining. There, sewn inside the lining of the bottom hem, was a hard, cylindrical object. She grabbed a pair of scissors and ripped the fabric. It wasn't a pen, it was a USB drive. A silver, metallic USB drive shaped like a fountain pen cap. She plugged it into her laptop. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to try 3 times. A single video file popped up. Title, In Case of Jade. She clicked play. Arthur Ivory's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his study, looking tired but sharp. Hello, Sarah. Or whoever was kind enough to pass my test. If you are watching this, it means my son has done something predictable. He has likely accused you of stealing. It's his favorite move. He did it to his first wife, and he did it to his CFO in '98. Arthur leaned into the camera. Jade is not just a bully. He is a thief. For the last 10 years, he has been siphoning profits through a shell company called Apex Logistics. He thinks I didn't know, but I tracked every cent. The proof isn't on the company servers where he can delete it. It's on this drive, every ledger, every forged signature. He didn't steal the pension fund, Sarah. He just moved it to make you look bad. But this will put him away for 20 years. Arthur smiled. Go get him, kid. The video ended. Sarah wiped her eyes. She didn't feel like a waitress anymore. She felt like a CEO. Get up, she told herself. Time to go to work. The boardroom, 11:02 a.m. The emergency meeting was in full swing. Jade sat at the head of the table, looking triumphant. The motion is on the table, Jade said, to permanently strip Sarah Miller of her title and shares due to criminal misconduct. All in favor? Every hand began to rise. Bam! The double doors flew open. Sarah marched in. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing her old waitress uniform, the one she had saved. Sarah, Jade laughed. Security. How did she get in here? I let her in, said the head of security, stepping into the doorway. He didn't look happy with Jade. She showed me something interesting. You have no business here, Jade sneered. You're fired. You're under investigation. Actually, Sarah said, walking calmly to the head of the table, I'm the majority shareholder, and I'm calling a new motion. She pulled the USB drive from her pocket and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Greg Patterton. What is this? Greg asked. That, Sarah said, her voice ringing with authority, is the ledger for Apex Logistics. Jade's face went white. The blood drained from him so fast he looked like a corpse. It contains records of the $40 million Jade has stolen from this company over the last decade, Sarah continued. And the digital trail showing how he framed me for the pension fund transfer yesterday. The FBI is reviewing the copy I sent them right now. Jade stood up, knocking his chair over. Lies! It's a fabrication. Sit down, Jade, Sarah commanded. And for the first time in his life, Jade Ivory didn't have a retort. He slumped back against the table. Sarah turned to the board. The motion on the table is the immediate removal of Jade Ivory and Greg Patterton from the board of directors, pending criminal charges. All in favor? The board members looked at Jade, sweating and shaking. Then they looked at Sarah, standing tall in her waitress apron. One hand went up, then another, then all of them. Motion carried, Sarah said. 2 FBI agents entered the room. The real ones this time, not Jade's lackeys. They walked straight to Jade. Jade Ivory, Agent Holloway said, you have the right to remain silent. As they handcuffed him, Jade looked at Sarah with pure venom. You're nothing, he spat. You're just a servant. Sarah smiled. I'm a waitress, Jade. We know how to deal with a mess. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Silver Spoon Diner was busy. The rain was hammering against the glass, just like it always did in November. A sleek car pulled up, but it wasn't a limousine. It was a practical electric sedan. Sarah walked in. She wasn't wearing an apron, but she wasn't wearing a power suit either. She wore a warm sweater and jeans. Hey, Sarah, the new manager called out. Brad had been fired months ago for theft. Ironic, really. Hey, guys, Sarah said. She walked to booth 4. Toby was sitting there, doing his homework. He looked healthy. His asthma was under control, and he was top of his class. Sarah slid into the booth. She placed a single item on the table. The annual report for Ivory Industries. Profit, up 12% charitable index, up 45%. She had done it. She had saved the company, not by being a shark, but by investing in her people. The workers loved her. The public adored her. She looked out the window. For a second, she thought she saw an old man in a tweed coat walking by, tipping his cap. But it was just a trick of the rain. The waitress came over, a young girl, maybe 19, looking exhausted. Can I get you guys anything? The girl asked. Sarah looked at the girl. She saw the frayed hem of her apron. She saw the tired eyes. Just coffee, Sarah said, and a slice of cherry pie. When the bill came, it was $12.40. Sarah took out her pen, the silver fountain pen she had bought to replace Arthur's. She wrote a check. She handed it to the girl. Keep the change, Sarah said. The girl looked at the check. Her eyes went wide. She dropped the tray. It was a check for $50,000. Scholarship fund, Sarah winked. Pay it forward. Sarah grabbed Toby's hand, and together they walked out into the rain, ready for whatever the unexpected brought next. And that is the incredible story of Sarah Miller, the waitress who tipped a billionaire and inherited an empire. She proved that kindness isn't a weakness, it's the ultimate power move. Jade thought he could crush her because she was just a servant, but he forgot that servants are the ones who clean up the trash. What did you think of Sarah's revenge? Did Jade get what he deserved, or was jail too good for him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We post new real-life dramas every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, you never know who you're talking to, so always be kind.